Hey guys, this is Cher, and today I'm going to be talking about some of the books that have had a big impression on me and have motivated me to pursue a career in medicine. Now, they're quite diverse, a few different aspects of medicine, and yeah, I made this video mostly for those of you who don't have the time at the end of a long day to read the books, or you'd rather do other things, so you can enjoy this over a cup of coffee and then save the end of your day for other important things. No, but honestly, these books have changed a lot of the way I perceive medicine, and stuff that I just wouldn't know from going to lectures and doing placements by really smart people who've written this book specifically for plebs like me on how to actually not be an idiot and do medicine properly. So in this mega book review, I'm going to be talking about Better, When Breath Becomes Air, The Laws of Medicine, Deep Medicine, and How Doctors Think. And just going to be sharing my thoughts about them and what I thought were some of the most important things. So enjoy. And if you really enjoyed it, leave a like and a sub. Really appreciate that. A word of warning though, before I get into the book review, most of these books were written by brown men. I didn't mean that to happen. They were just the books that seemed to leave a big impression on me. So next time, maybe when I do this, I will include a more diverse range of authors. So the first book we'll be diving into is Better by Atul Gawande, and this was the first book I ever read that really tried to delve into both, the limitations of medicine and some of the lesser known marvels of it. And he does this through a series of stories where clinicians, either through powerful deductive techniques or through just coincidence, found ways to improve medicine and make it better overall. And you could say this book gave me a better understanding of what it really takes to be a good doctor, not just being technically proficient, but doing the little things right that make a big impact on patients and peers. And through these stories that he shares, he tries to convey what he thinks are the three most important core requirements for being a successful doctor. So the first one is diligence. So that is simply just doing the little things right, making sure you are involved in every part of the care and thinking about little things that make a big difference. Something like hand washing, on a regular basis can, over a lifetime, have a big impact on the lives of patients. Now, the second core requirement he talks about is to do right. And the biggest takeaway I got from this was to make sure that I'm honest and transparent when I'm talking to patients, especially about the mistakes, as a way to both save yourself litigation down the track and to give patients and their family peace of mind, especially if they've lost someone through either a mistake or something has happened down the track in their care that could have been done better. And he mentions this because a lot of the time when patients or patients' family pursue legal action is because they just wanted answers, and none of the doctors would actually talk to them and have an upfront conversation about what actually happened. And just having that conversation can make a big difference to the patients and the patient's friends and family as well. And the third thing he talks about is ingenuity. So ingenuity, he doesn't just mean, being involved in game-changing technology or being excited about it, but also trying to find effective ways to improve existing technology or simple things that implemented every day can have a big difference. So a good example of this was the APGAR score that was made by Dr. Virginia APGAR. And this was a simple metric that really saved the lives of babies and allowed, on-the-fly discrimination of, the health status of a newborn baby. And one of the most important quotes from that was that we make a science of improving existing technology, not just creating new technology. And his call to action at the end of the book just kind of gives you 5 key takeaways or 5 important things that you should try and implement if you want to be a good doctor. And the first one is ask a question. So what he means by this is don't just follow, the guidelines you have set wholeheartedly, or actually take a bit of extra time to get to know the patient a little better, and you might actually learn more than you originally thought. And be creative about your questions as well. Do the extra little things to personalize yourself with the patient. So number 2 was don't complain. And this is one that kind of grinds my gears a bit as well, because often I hear, peers or people in my friendship group or in my cohort, they're constantly complaining about, the coursework or the exams, or this was wrong. And, it's fine to see problems and try to fix them, but, constantly just being so negative about all that stuff just brings everyone down. And if you really want to be a good doctor, you want to be positive, you want to be a positive influence, you want to bring people up. And just reiterating negative stuff and complaining all the time doesn't help anyone. Pretty much, if something doesn't invigorate people to do better, stop doing it. Now, number 3 is count something. So this is more a point about becoming your own epidemiologist and following trends over time. Pick something and try to see if you can find a pattern, or see if you can find something that is starting to correlate that no one else may have recorded or known about, and you may well find something that could be really important in medicine. And number 4 is write something, or make a YouTube video about it. Also a good thing. Anything that kind of helps you decompress or convey your feelings or share your messages with people can really just foster this kind of this learning that spreads. You never know how far it spreads, so that's a good one too. And the last one is change. So probably heard this many times, don't get stuck in the same routines. If you're stuck in a rut, just change something. Change what time you wake up, change how you get dressed, change what you wear, change how you think about things. Question if you have any biases, any stereotypes of people you have, any prejudice, and really try to wrestle with that and find new ways of thinking. Now, the book When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. This one, I'm sure most of you probably heard of it or read of it, but this is one you're going to want to reserve for a free weekend, because I remember I finished it in 2 days. I couldn't put it down. It was so good. And just listening to his journey about, from being a neurosurgeon and how, I'm sure, you heard the old adage of, it's not neurosurgery, but just the level of dedication you need to get to his level. And then just before, you finally reach that hurdle of finishing and becoming a consultant, finishing his residency, he's hit with this cancer diagnosis and a terminal illness that he dies from. And the book talks a lot about death and the meaning of life. And some of the more memorable things I got from it was one thing he mentioned was that as a resident, his highest ideal wasn't saving lives, it was making sure patients and families had an idea of death and illness and had a better appreciation and understanding of it. And also another thing he mentioned is being able to discriminate between when a life should be saved and when a life can be saved. And he suggests that, he was talking about this one scenario where he took a patient into the OR, saved just enough brain tissue so that his heart could beat and he'd be alive, but he'd have to eat food through a tube, couldn't talk, couldn't move his body. And he kind of recognized that as a bigger failure than just of having that person die. And perhaps, just because you can save someone doesn't mean you should save someone. And the main takeaway I took from this book was just how your life can change at any moment. And as medical students, we focus so much on the end goal, once we finish all these hurdles, that we kind of just lose track of taking stock of the moment, how far you've been, what you have left, and appreciating what you have in your life at the moment, because these things are just unpredictable. And I think a nice thing that they mentioned at the end was just because Paul's death was tragic doesn't mean his life was a tragedy. And I think we should look at, people's lives in that perspective as well. You shouldn't measure someone's life in the way in which they died. Now, the third book I want to talk to you guys about was The Laws of Medicine by Siddhartha Mukherjee. And this one is quite a short book, and he tries to distill his knowledge into, you guessed it, 3 central tenets of what is a good doctor and what makes a good doctor. What aspects, of medicine are things that probably never will change, and some things that, will change significantly over my lifetime or, in the future. And a key quote I got from this book was that he states that, it's easy to make perfect decisions with perfect information, but medicine asks you to make perfect decisions with imperfect information. And he kind of interweaves this theme throughout the book by suggesting his own laws are laws of imperfection. And, as you can probably guess, the biggest takeaway I got from this book was that, medicine has these laws or these rules on which how to do things, but they're not immutable facts. They're tools to interpret the world. And, just by knowing the facts does not mean, you'll be able to treat a patient every time. Sometimes you have to make decisions with imperfect information. So the first law he talks about is a strong intuition is much more powerful than a weak test. And I'll try and summarize this with a paragraph from the book. Every diagnostic challenge in medicine can be imagined as a probability game. This is how you play the game. You assign a probability that a patient's symptoms can be explained by some pathological dysfunction, heart failure, say, or rheumatoid arthritis. Then you summon evidence to increase or decrease that probability. Every scrap of evidence, a patient's history, the doctor's instincts, findings from a physical exam, past experience, rumours, hunches, all these things raise or lower the possibility. Once the probability tips over a certain point, you order a confirmatory test, and then you read the test in the context of the prior pre-test probability. Pretty much what he's saying is prior knowledge is critical in making good decisions, and a test is simply a machine that alters those probabilities of whether something will be this or that. And then he expands a bit further on this. It's like, if you can do all these tests, but if something doesn't feel right to you, it's better to trust your instinct in those circumstances. And he talks about this by an example when he was a junior doctor, I think, and there was someone more senior to him, and he did all the tests, like the author did all the tests, and everything seemed fine, but the doctor kept checking on him, and something didn't sit right with him. And just before he was about to finish his shift, he went up there one more time. And just as he went up there, the patient started deteriorating. So that's a situation that if you just took the test at face value, he never would have noticed the deteriorating patient. Now, the second law he talks about is that normals teach us rules, but outliers teach us laws. And when he says this, he's describing how we have normals, like normal rules for normal patients, which is a normal treatment plan, normal management plan, but it's the outliers that we tend to ignore, or the ones we tend to exclude, especially when we're doing research or when you look through articles, are the ones that actually are the key to improving certain aspects of medicine or improving our understanding about a disease or the pathogenesis of a disease or the management of a disease. So he says, make it a point to focus not just on the typical presentation of things, but when things don't quite seem to fit right, and how that can change the medical space and how that can improve the medical space. And the third and final law he talks about is that for every perfect medical experiment, there's a perfect human bias. And he tries to preface this by saying that doctors, we no longer search for diseases, we search for biases. And that as we go through this information age and we're inundated with new research every day about certain things, our main goal is not going to be about finding the disease, but trying to make sense of the data and actually interpreting it and making the most sense out of it. And more information doesn't mean better testing or more accuracy. It actually means more bias. So we have to think more deeply about everything we do and the significance of the tests and things that we do. And he just mentions how deeply like bias is ingrained in our psyche. Like something as simple as adding the word radical in front of mastectomy had really big consequences, because it was a much more invasive surgical procedure that actually didn't have any better health outcomes, and it caused a lot of long-term consequences to these women. But a generation of surgeons, thinking that the word radical meant new or better or a better thing, just adopted that technique and were reluctant to give it up later. So the fourth book I'm going to talk about is Deep Medicine by Eric Topol. And this was one of the first books I read about medicine, and it was the one that really excited me about a career in medicine, because it didn't just talk about a doctor's perspective or doctor's experience in a hospital, but it also had more of a future focus and what areas are ripe for creative destruction, and how his thoughts on how like artificial intelligence and deep learning systems are going to shape the way medicine is going to be done and performed. And this was one of the, and I think Eric, talking like I know this guy, really conveyed, one of the things that I was really looking forward to in a career in medicine is, as we make way of these AI and deep learning things, the focus is going to be less on the diagnostics and the menial tasks and more on, understanding the patient holistically and guiding, their understanding of their illness, guiding, how they go through the process, and really looking at the patient holistically and helping them through a process. And I believe, if we didn't focus so much on the diagnostics and focused on empowering the patient, there'd be so much better outcomes, and patients would, look forward to seeing the doctor more and, as much as you can when you have a disease or illness, and, be more welcomed and understood going through that process. Now, the last book I wanted to talk about was How Doctors Think. And this book is designed, for patients as well as doctors, and it kind of talks about some of the thought process and thinking that goes through doctors' brains when they're, after they've, established some clinical experience and had some experience in a hospital, and some of the pitfalls and the biases they have, and how you can recognize those things to keep an open mind and to stop yourself from going down the wrong train of thought. And this is something I started thinking more about as I get further along in my degree, and we slowly move on to seeing more patients and stuff. And you start to narrow down your thought process as soon as you see a patient, as soon as you look at their gait, as soon as you start to take their history, ask questions. Your brain's constantly trying to narrow things down. And while this is good, a lot of the time, sometimes it can allow you to miss important things or not get the full picture or make judgments about someone which may actually be incorrect. So it's just a reminder of being aware of those things as a doctor, and making sure that, while they have a place, sometimes it's important to take a step back. So, don't just do something, stand there. And I think another thing he harks on is like just how important GPs are. So GPs are general practitioners. In America, I think they're called family physicians. And GPs are quite respected here in Australia, but around the world, they're less so. And I feel like, that was something I feel quite strongly, because I think GPs are really important, like gatekeepers to healthcare. And their main job is to just filter who has diseases and who doesn't, as well as providing, some basic generalized level care. But it's important because the way they think about patients is completely different to how a specialist thinks about patients. A specialist has this narrow thought, and they know about every disease, and they just try and focus on that narrow thing. Whereas GPs have to take the time to look at a patient holistically, and naturally it's better initially to have that kind of frame of mind and not narrowing down too much. And he closes the book with advice for both patients and doctors to better direct their care. And it's just about asking simple questions like, what else could it be? Is there anything that doesn't fit? Is it possible I have more than one problem? Tell me what you're most worried about. Retell the story from the beginning. And this can help a doctor or a patient think more broadly about their disease and look at things they might have missed ordinarily. And I guess, that's the end of my mega book review of books by doctors for doctors. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned some cool things from it. Hope you can implement some of those things. And I'll see you next time. Hey, bye.